Hello there, good afternoon. Paul Michael Bales here, and today I want to talk about giants because with everyone talking about giants at the moment, you've got the big friendly giant in the cinema at the moment. Then, as soon as that came out, you had Eric DeBay speaking about flat Earth and ancient giants. Then, a couple of weeks later, after him speaking about that, you had this unknown Russian guy coming out of nowhere and coming out with ancient no forest on the flat earth. So he's talking about ancient giant trees cut by ancient giants. Then you had Laurie Foray and gang like Lawrence Wright there with their flat earth conspiracy talking about ancient giants and how ancient giants built the pyramids. So a lot of talk about giants, especially involving the flat earth. Now, regarding the pyramids, they used to say that aliens built the pyramids. That was a big psyop. And if you're a flat earther now, then you know that aliens don't exist. So they can't tell you that aliens built the pyramids, and now they're telling you that giants are building the pyramids. They can't tell you that aliens come and civilize ancient man, so now they're telling you that giants came and civilized ancient man. You've got the Smithsonian Institute coming out saying that their documents were destroyed regarding the giants, and there's pictures of like ancient excavation of bones and like giant skulls and stuff, giant humans. It's all propaganda, just like dinosaurs when they show you these fake dinosaur bones. And I think it's a big psyop, and I think they all come out at the same time saying this to distract you from the flat earth or infect the flat earth with a bit of poison. Right. I want to give you the truth about the giants because some people think, oh, the giants must exist because it's in the Bible. Right, I've got a book here. It's an old book. It's called A Dissertation of the Kabiri. It's one of my favorite books. I saved up for ages trying to get this book. There's two of them. This is volume 1 and volume 2 is up there. You can probably see it if I put it up. All right, let's see. There you go. It's right next to it there. There you go. There's number 2. And this is by a man named G.S. Faber. This is volume 1 here. This is all about the antediluvian people, the titans, the giants, Noah and the flood. And this tells you the truth behind it. It's a really old book. I might struggle reading it a little bit because in these sort of really old books, the S's are spelt like an F. So sometimes it like tricks your mind and you're thinking F. So sometimes you have to think like two or 3 seconds more of thought in reading it in case you make a mistake. Right. So here's the book here. It's quite. See how old it is. You've got a picture right at the start. Oh, there we go. I don't know if you can see that. I'll try to hold it up for you. There we go. There we go. It's quite a long title. You see in these old books, the titles are really long. This what this says: a dissertation on the mysteries of the Kabiri, or the great gods of Phoenicia, Samothrace, Egypt, Troas, Greece, Italy, and Crete, being an attempt to deduce the several orgies of Isis, Ceres, Mithras, Bacchus, Rhea, Adonis, and Hecate from a union of the rites commemorative of the deluge with the adoration of the host of heaven, by George Stanley Faber. 1803 this was published, so it's quite an old book, over 100 years old. And I'll read the preface for you because I think preface usually tells you about the whole book, so I don't have to read the whole book to you. I'll just read the preface. The object of the following dissertation is to show that the mysteries of the Kabiri which I conceive to have been the very same as those of Isis, Ceres, Mithras, Bacchus, Rhea, and Adonis, were principally founded upon certain mutilated traditions of the deluge. Pagan records abound with the corrupted accounts of that catastrophe, and even frequently enter into the minutiae of its history with a most surprising degree of accuracy, insomuch that the most careless observer cannot but be struck with the resemblance in this point to the Mosaical narrative. All such traditions may be considered as the direct attestations which the mythology of the Gentiles bears to the existence of a general flood. In addition to them, it is replete also with allusions to it. These latter, indeed, are necessary, less obvious than the former, and are therefore more easily overlooked. But yet, when combined together, when viewed in all their different bearings, and when connected with a variety of kindred circumstances, they will be found to afford, if not so palpable, yet certainly more curious proof of the authenticity of the book of Genesis. With respect to the Titans, whom the reader will find to make a very prominent figure in the ensuing pages, it is proper to observe that in elucidating their history I have been obliged to dissent entirely from the system adopted in the eminently learned work, The Analysis of Ancient Mythology. I have long suspected that the Titanic War, so celebrated in Grecian story, relates to the events of the deluge, and not to the miraculous overthrow of Nimrod and his followers in the plains of Shinar. This I intimated in a former publication, but was at that time prevented by the extensiveness of my subject from pursuing the supposition in the manner which I could have wished to have done. Upon communicating my sentiments to Mr. Bryant, I had the pleasure of finding that his opinion was at present nearly the same as my own, and I doubt not but that the permission which he has given me to sanction my hypothesis, with the weight of such an authority as his, will have its due influence upon the minds of my readers. You make an excuse, says he, for differing from me in respect to the Titans and giants of antiquity. There is no occasion for apology at any rate, but more particularly as I am of the same opinion, and have been for many years. I was of a different opinion once, as you very properly intimate, but I was obliged to alter my notions. In the system which forms the basis of the present work, it is supposed that the word Titan is derived from Tit, the Coloves of the deluge, and consequently that it signifies a diluvian. It is further conjectured that the appellation Titans was a general name of the persons who were living at the era of the deluge, both those who were saved in the ark and those who perished beneath the waves. Hence it will follow that the Titans of ancient mythology ought to be divided into two distinct classes, the former of which consisting of Kronos and his 7 children, mentioned by Sanchoni Ato and enumerated by the Orphic poet, is the Archite Ogdoad, while the latter, consisting of the other Titans, who are feigned to have fought against Jupiter and to have been overthrown by that deity, comprehends all the persons who were destroyed by the flood. To this division of the Titans I have been obliged to have recourse in order to account for the seeming contrary of their being, sometimes described as the impious opponents of heaven, and sometimes as the great gods of the Gentiles. Nor do I see how it can be accounted for on any other principles, though upon this point I differ apparently, though I believe not really, from Mr. Bryant. In his last letter to me he says, "There seems to me to be no occasion to make any division of the Titans, 8 of whom were saved in the deluge, when all the rest of that name perished. What you mention concerning the Kabiri appears to me very just. Every point is confirmed by history, I have written a great deal upon the gods of Greece and Rome, and upon the principal female deities, which may possibly be published after my death. It is of a large amount, and aims at the same scope to which you direct your present labours. I have also written concerning the several parts of the world to which those of the dispersion betook themselves, which were widely separated and far different, yet the identity of the original people may be plainly in all parts perceived. I need scarcely observe how great an acquisition to every serious believer in truth of the Jewish scriptures this promised work of Mr. Bryant will be. This in reality is the whole that I contend for, namely that all Diluvians were called Titans, that 8 of those Titans were saved, that the rest of mankind, namely the other Titans, miserably perished. In the following attempt to elucidate the mysteries of the Kabiri, I ventured to differ from the annalists of ancient mythology in various matters beside my account of the Titanic war. I have also differed considerably from many other very learned and valuable works, but I trust that whenever I have found it necessary to express my dissent, I have always done it in that respectful language to which the worth and talents of their authors so justly entitled them. The field of inquiry is open to all, nor ought any man to be censured on the score or presumption merely because he disagrees with his predecessors. Fully conscious at the same time of the deep obscurity which involves the history of the Kabiri, as I have made objections to the systems of others, I am prepared to expect that objections may also be made to various parts of my own system. Upon this point, however, I can with the utmost sincerity adopt the sentiment of Tully. Right, that's the end of the preface. I'll read you through the contents. You've got volume 1, you've got chapter 1, preliminary observations, chapter 2, an analysis of the Phoenician history of Sanchonia, chapter 3, the identity of the Kabiri, Corybants, Curates, Discori, Anax, D. Magni, Ide, Dactyl, Telchines, Lairs, Penates, Manes, Titans, and Aleti, and the mythological character of the heathen goddesses. Chapter 4, the polyonomy of the sun and the union of the archetype and the solar worship. Chapter 5, the connection of the fabulous Hades with the mysteries of the Kabiri. Chapter 6, concerning the various countries which were devoted to the Kabiric superstition, particularly Italy, Crete, Samothrace, and Troas. And we've got volume 2, chapter 7, concerning the sacred terms Hith or Sith and Kol or Kol, and the various traditions found upon them. Chapter 8, the connection of the Argonautic voyage with the Helio-Archite superstition. And chapter 9, the War of the Titans, the identity and import of the several mysteries of Isis, Ceres, Mithras, Bacchus, Re, Adonis, and the Kabiri, a dissertation on the Mithric cavern. So basically he's connecting all the ancient myths with the Bible, showing you that the Noah's Ark is the same as the destruction of the Nephilim in the flood is the same as the destruction of the Titans by Jupiter or Zeus. So basically it's the war of the gods, it's not real giants you're talking about. Which makes sense because as a creationist, I believe all that's here was created to be a part of this earth. So, and all created at the same time. So you've got the bees which pollinate the flowers. Without the bees, the flowers wouldn't exist. Just as without the carbon dioxide, the plants won't exist. And if the plants and trees didn't exist, we wouldn't exist because we need the oxygen. You see, everything's connected. So when they start bringing in new things like ice ages and dinosaurs, woolly mammoths, saber-toothed tigers. It's not natural. That's evolution, which doesn't exist. It's fake. It's creationism is real. Everything has a purpose. Everything was intelligently designed. Saber-toothed tiger is not intelligently designed. Look at its giant fangs that hang down there. How is it supposed to hunt like that? A wildcat needs its teeth, its fangs, to bite into the jugular vein of the animal for a quick kill, to avoid injury, and also probably to avoid the great creator, the god, made it that way so the animal that it gets killed doesn't suffer so much. A quick bite to the jugular vein kills it instantly, basically, and painless. Just as we do in when like Jews sacrifice the goats, and that is just a cut to the jugular vein. It stops the suffering of the animal and kills it at the same time. He says here that the crescent moon is related to the ark. So you see, that's another thing there. That's the whole astrology, the astral theology, how the characters of the Bible relate to the stars, or the characters of mythology relate to the stars. Zeus, the god Zeus, he relates to the planet Jupiter. Kronos, the god Kronos, the Titan, the giant, relates to Saturn. Yeah, it says here, Noah and the sun were henceforth regarded as one divine object, and the ark in which he was preserved was profanely reverenced in the conjunction with the moon. The Chaldeans soon became famous throughout the world for their astronomical researches, and while they marshalled the stars in a variety of distinct constellations, they contrived to depict upon their sphere the principal events which are narrated in the history of the deluge. Noah, so what's he saying here is that they've used the story of the stars, the path of the stars, and they've dramatized it in their myths, in their religion, personalized the stars, creating stories out of them, so that the reason I'm a poet myself, so the reason poets and mystics and priests and stuff do this is because if you keep knowledge in a story, that knowledge may be forgotten, the secrets of the stars, but the story itself is never forgotten because it's passed down and people remember it, and it becomes like fairy tales and stuff. People remember the story, they may not always remember the message or the secrets hidden inside it. But then when the readers grow more spiritual, more aware, and understand more wise, they can read that same story and see the secrets that have been veiled inside it. They can unveil them, or unveil them, should I say. Yeah. Noah, however, was not the only patriarch worshipped along with the sun. In subsequent ages, Ham not unfrequently obtained the same honour. I may here, therefore, with propriety notice a singular sort of confusion which will be found very generally to pervade the mythology of the heathens. Noah and his triple offspring are continually represented to us under the character of an ancient deity and his 3 sons. And yet every one of these 3 sons is upon various occasions confounded with his father. It was the 3 in 1, a bit like the Trinity. Thus, Saturn, Jupiter, Neptune, and Pluto, taken conjointly, are evidently Noah, Ham, Japhet, and Shem. Nevertheless, as will hereafter sufficiently appear, Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto, which considered separately are all equally the solar Noah, while Neptune very frequently seems to be the same patriarch adored as a Diluvian god. This remark will equally apply to the Cronus of Sanchon Ieto and his three sons, Cronus the younger, Jupiter Belus, and Apollo, to the Brahm of the Hindustan and his children Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and to the boar of Scandinavia and his triple offspring, Odin, Vald, and Ve. Many observations in the course of the present work will be built upon this curious, though to my own conviction at least undoubted, circumstance. That the moon and ark were worshipped together will abundantly appear in the sequel. It is not improbable that this peculiar kind of idolatry might have originated from the following circumstance. When the two great superstitions were united, and when Noah began to be adored along with the sun, the Chaldean astronomers, having observed the resemblance of a crescent to a boat, thought that the waning moon was no unapt symbol for the ark. Hence they were reverenced conjointly, and hence we find that the very same goddess was sometimes a personification of the one, and sometimes of the other. Varro accordingly asserts that the moon, when in the form of a crescent, was called Janna. But Janus is the scriptural Noah. Consequently, Janna is the noetic ark of the crescent. This I apprehend to be the only key that can unlock the hidden meaning of the mysterious polytheism of the ancients. Osiris, Bacchus, Kronos, Pluto, Adonis, and Hercules, taken in one point of view, as will be shown at large hereafter, are all equally the sun. But if we examine their respective histories, and attentively consider the actions which are ascribed to them, we shall be convinced that in the human capacity they can each be no other than the great patriarch. In a familiar manner, the various goddesses of paganism seem to be all one and the same mythological character, though they sometimes represent the moon, sometimes the ark, and sometimes the earth emerging from the waters of the deluge. From this union of the two primitive superstitions originate the custom of bestowing the names of the hero gods upon the celestial catasterisms. I think that says. Modern astronomy still continues to retain the same titles, and Nimrod himself, the founder of this compound idolatry, still holds a conspicuous place in the sphere, and still overlooks the affairs of mortals from the brilliant constellation of Orion. The severe flattery of more recent times translated the deified spirit of the first Caesar into the Julian Sidus, and a great astronomer of the present day, adopting the classical complement without the classical impiety, has given the appellation of the Georgium Sidus to his newly discovered planet. The mysteries of the Kabiri are in fact nothing more than a mythological account of these events, and they will be found throughout to refer at once to the catastrophe of the deluge and to the impious rites of that Sabianism which was united by Nimrod with the archaic superstition. The present attempt to analyze the history of the Kabiri is built upon the following principles. 1. Allegory and personification were peculiarly agreeable to the genius of antiquity, and the simplicity of truth was perpetually sacrificed at the shrine of the poetical decoration. I was saying there what I was saying earlier about the poets. Hence we find that the old mythologists invented a variety of sacred emblems, expressive of the helio-archite object of worship, which I shall very frequently have occasion to notice in the ensuing pages. The most usual symbols of the sun were a lion, a serpent, those of Noah, a bull, a horse, and a Sif united with man. Those of the ark, a heifer, a mare, a Sif united with a woman, a ram, a boar, a cup, a sea monster, and a beautiful female, who was sometimes described as a virgin and sometimes represented as the mother of the gods and as the consort, the daughter, the parent, or the sister of the principal archaic deity. That such emblems were really used will be shown here after. At present, therefore, I merely noticed them. 2. The obscurity necessarily attendant upon allegorical personifications was heightened by the vanity which prompted each nation to adapt to their own peculiar mythology, facts equally connected with the whole race of mankind. Commemorative ordinances were established and remarkable events were exhibited in a kind of scenical representation. In most cases, their origin and their import seem to have been equally forgotten, and thus would forever have remained had not the page of scripture afforded that explanation which had long been obliterated from the annals of the Gentiles. 3. A considerable portion of ancient history has been handed down to us through the medium of literature of Greece, and its passages has received a very great degree of corruption. The religion of that celebrated Peninsular is confessedly of foreign extraction. Egypt and the East were the sources from which, in a great measure, the Greeks equally derived their origin and their mythology. But the delicacy of classical ears and the vain affectation of remote antiquity induced them to corrupt various Oriental words and to seek for the radicals of them in their own language. This vanity has been productive of many absurd misrepresentations and has superinduced much obscurity over several very remarkable traditions. It will be necessary, therefore, in the elucidation of Greek antiquity, frequently to have recourse to the Oriental tongues. For Diodorus Siculus informs us that the Samothracians had a peculiar dialect of their own, which prevailed in their sacred rites, and Jamblichus plainly declares that the language used in the mysteries was not that of Greece but of Egypt and Assyria. Accordingly, he highly censures the folly of those who imagined the barbarous words possessed no inherent signification, and tells us that the language of the mysteries was the language of the gods, the first and most ancient language which was spoken upon earth. Hence we may learn the meaning of that constant and curious distinction made by Homer between the dialect of the gods and the dialect of men. These gods were the famous archaic Ogdod, and their language was Chaldee or Hebrew, while that of the mortals was the more modern dialect of Greece. The derivation indeed of the very alphabet used by that polite and ingenious nation offers itself a clue to direct us in our researches. It leads us obviously to that wide-spreading language which once extended itself over so many of the western regions of Asia, which still prevails in the shape of one of its dialects through so large a portion of both Africa and of the East. The same radicals equally serve to form the basis of the kindred tongues of Chaldea, Syria, Palestine, Phoenicia, and Arabia. By the commerce of Tyre and by the early colonists from Asia, it was diffused around the coast of the Mediterranean, and the adventurous navigators of the Carthage have left some traces of it even upon the remote shores of Britain. The secluded descendants of Israel occupied but an inconsiderable division of that immense tract over which this ancient tongue had extended itself. Nor does it appear probable that the Greeks borrowed many Oriental radicals immediately from that people. It is more likely that they were adopted from some of the collateral dialects of those Eastern nations which were less averse than the Jews to an unrestrained intercourse with mankind. 4. As the Greeks have borrowed most of their sacred terms from the Oriental dialects, so we shall find that the names of their ancient kings and heroes are for the most part mere variations either of the word Noah, or of the titles of the solar deity. Hence it will follow that the long genealogies of these imaginary personages, which occur too frequently in the writings of the Greek mythologists, are purely fabulous and can never be esteemed any part of genuine and authentic history. When carefully examined, they will be found to be nothing more than a series of repetitions, insomuch that the grandfather, a father, and a son, though apparently distinct characters, prove in reality to be only one and the same person. Noah, worshipped in conjunction with the sun. Thus, to give a single instance, Minyas was sometimes esteemed the offspring and sometimes the father of Orchomenus, who was descended from Pelagus, Pheronius, Inachus, and Oceanus. All these, however, excepting the last, are merely different appellations of the great patriarch. I shall conclude this chapter with a list of ancient radicals which seem to enter into the composition of most of the sacred terms of Hellenic mythology. The greatest part of them are either Punic or Chaldee. Some few do not occur in those dialects, which are probably fragments of the old language of the Mysiarium, and one of the two are Sanskrit, from which they have passed into several different tongues, both ancient and modern. I am aware of the prejudice entertained against remote etymologies, and am perfectly sensible that the derivation of words ought to be admitted with very great caution. Hence, generally speaking, I shall endeavour not to deduce an imaginary history from a derivation equally imaginary, but on the contrary, to deduce the derivation from the circumstances of an actually existing history. I am aware also of the objection made by Sir William Jones to the system adopted throughout the principal work of Mr. Bryant, that he professes to derive the words of any one language from those of another, must expose himself to the dangers of perpetual errors, unless he be perfectly acquainted with both. This objection, however, I trust will be in great measure be found inapplicable to the following remarks of the Cabiric mysteries. For since the theology of Greece is avowedly of Chaldean, Phoenician, and Egyptian extraction, since Diodorus Siculus asserts that the Samothracians used the remains of a very ancient dialect which was not Greek in their sacred rites, and since Jamblichus declares that the language of the mysteries was that of Egypt and Assyria, I cannot see why that derivation of Hellenic mythological terms from the Punic or the Coptic should be thought justly deserving of censure. I purpose, therefore, almost exclusively to confine my etymological researches to Greek, Latin, Phoenician, or Elegian names. Whenever I venture to extend them beyond these limits, the reader will judge for himself how far I am authorized to do so by the particular combination of circumstances. Right. It just goes on to list loads of words there. Right. I'll end it there because it's been quite a long reading, and it's getting struggling to read it now, so I'll stop. But I think you get the picture by now. Like, he's connecting all the ancient religions and mythologies together, showing you that they all represent the same gods but with different names, or names that mean the same but in different dialects, or names connected etymologically. He's showing you that Noah and his sons is the same as like Jupiter and his sons. He's showing you that the deluge, the destruction of the giants, is the same as the destruction of the Titans by Jupiter. He's showing you the connection between the stars, the sun, and the moon, and these characters, how these the celestial stars and planets are being personalized and dramatized and put into story in order to save the knowledge and pass it on to people. People remember a story. People remember a poem. They may not remember the knowledge that it teaches, but they remember the story. They remember the fairy tale. They remember the myths. Right. I hope this helped clear up a few things about the giants, the titans, who they really are and who they really are not. Were they giant people? Not as giant as they're saying. There's always been big people. That's how these myths start, because even in today's world, you get people with, is it gargantism or some sort of illness which makes them grow really, really, really tall. You've got people like the Big Show and Undertaker and in wrestling who are really big, tall people. You get like 7-foot people, really big people. I think there's that is it a Russian guy in boxing who's really big. I can't remember his name. And there's I think I've seen on YouTube, really tall model, the tallest model in the world, and she's really tall as well. So there's always been really tall people, and a lot of these stories about giants are based on them. Just as pygmies, the tiny people, and dwarfs. There's so many stories and mythologies about these guys. You've got like Snow White and the 7 dwarfs. Doesn't mean there were 7 dwarfs, the one named Sleepy and one named Ditsy or whatever his name is, Dopey. But there are real dwarfs out there, and the poets use these characters to create myths. So you've got pygmies create pixies and fairies. The pixies and fairies of the forest that come from the pygmies, the real African pygmies, who in some parts of the world were even considered like mythology, because like fairy tale, because they never saw them. They were rare. Whereas these days we got cameras, we got people exploring, and if people have found these like pygmies in the forest, so then they know they're real. Right. Have a lovely day, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. Take care. God bless everyone.